He's been writing about energy, politics, and innovation for more than 3 decades. He's the author of 6 books, including his latest, A Question of Power, Electricity and the Wealth of Nations. Robert is also the producer of a new 5-part docuseries called Juice, Power, Politics, and the Grid, which is available free on YouTube. You can follow Robert on Substack, which is robertbryce.substack.com. He lives in Austin, Texas with his wife, Lauren, who's right over here. She's a teacher, photographer, master potter, and guest tonight. Thank you. Robert's gonna speak now for about 20 minutes. Everything you have in front of you is some of the slides he'll go through, and then we're gonna start our panel discussion. So Robert, thank you so much for coming to Boston and being our guest tonight.
20 minutes, I'm going to hit you with about 25 slides. I'm going to drop a stat bomb on all of you. Get ready for a lot of numbers. Okay, Paul and I talked about the format tonight, and I said, well, I think it's the critical part of understanding net zero and the issues at hand is context. And for many years, I've done a lot of public speaking. I didn't use PowerPoint. But the more I got into understanding the physics and the numbers of the energy and power, it's imperative. It is imperative to understand the numbers and the comparisons with the numbers themselves. So that's the goal of the next 20 minutes. All right. The reality is this net zero madness, these net zero mandates, it's all consumer pain and there is no climate gain. I'm going to give you these 5 points. I won't read this to you, but I'm going to run through them right away here and talk you through why, in fact, there is no energy transition. And instead, what we have seen has been a sustained and very effective propaganda effort. And I use that word very carefully. I don't necessarily like that word, but the difference, as Twain said, between the right word and the wrong word is quite a big difference. It's the difference between the lightning and the lightning bug. And what we have been subjected to systematically over the last 10 years or so, but particularly with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, has been a sustained propaganda effort to convince policymakers and the public that there is an energy transition underway, and there ain't. All right. My late mother was a grammarian, and she always corrected my grammar. God bless her. She believed in me as a journalist before I did. There ain't none. Not my numbers, the numbers. The stat bomb starts now. The Statistical Review of World Energy Data. Not my numbers, the numbers. This is in fact just updated today because the Energy Institute just released the Statistical Review of World Energy for 2025. So these CO2 numbers are the latest that are available. The 6 largest economies in the world. Look at China and India, obviously here in the red and the green. Those 2 countries account for about 2.7 or 2.8 billion people. Unless or until China and India decide to quit burning coal or that they don't like using energy and electricity, this trajectory is not going to change. Note the green bar here. This is the US. The US has reduced its emissions more than any other country in the world by far on an absolute basis. Why is that? Mostly natural gas displacing coal in the power sector. But God bless the Germans. Here they are, that yellow line. They will waste €1 trillion, assuming that they can change the trajectory of global CO2 emissions and therefore global climate. They have a very high opinion of themselves. Look at this slide. Now look at this one. These are the exact same sets of numbers, exact same numbers, the exact same source. The Energy Institute, Statistical Review of World Energy, latest numbers just came out today. So I just updated this slide just a few hours ago. Here's the US again, reduced its emissions more than any other country in the world by far, 1.1 gigatons, 1,100 million tons. But look at what has happened in China and India, an increase of roughly 10 gigatons, 10,000 million tons. There is no energy transition. Where is it in the numbers? Unless or until China and India change this trajectory, there is no energy transition. Or if there is one, tell me where it is and go slowly, because I'm from Oklahoma. I'm a little slow. There is no evidence in the data, no evidence in the numbers to show that there is an energy transition underway. Instead, what we have been seeing is a sustained, very effective, give them credit, media effort to convince the public and policymakers that this thing is real. And what is the goal of all this policy push? It's about money. I don't think it's it's not, well, although, okay, cynicism. I quote Lily Tomlin all the time. No matter how cynical I get, I can't keep up. It's not a cynical view to say that this climatism and the push for alternative energy here in New England and in many parts of the US, Western Europe, around the world, is motivated by money. There's no altruism for the big banks or big business or big law firms or the big NGOs. This is about money, full stop. All right, let's talk about specifics. I'm adamantly pro-nuclear. If you're anti-nuclear and anti-carbon dioxide, you're pro-blackout. I'm anti-blackout, very much so. My wife Lauren and I live in Austin. We were blacked out during Winter Storm Uri for 48 hours. I've been through blackouts. We now have a Generac at our house, by the way. And just briefly as an aside, this is not in my script, but we have a Generac. We put it in last summer. And Lauren and I have been married 39 years this month. Conversation on the Generac went like this. It was $15,000. It's 22 kilowatts. I found a vendor I liked. I said, well, I went to Lauren and said, well, honey, I kind of want to do this. And she said, I don't want to spend $15,000 on that. I said, well, I don't either. So we could go to Europe. We could do all that. I said, I understand that. And then she said, but if we don't get it and there's a blackout, you're going to blame me. So now we have a Generac. Back to the numbers. I'm adamantly pro-nuclear. More than half of all the new nuclear capacity in the world is being built in India and China, but they are building, in fact, in China today, 6 times more coal-fired capacity than they are building nuclear. Not my numbers, the numbers. International Atomic Energy Agency data for the nuclear, Global Energy Monitor for the coal numbers. This 204,000 megawatts, 204 gigawatts of new coal that is under construction in China, not permitted, not talked about, not in blueprint stage, is larger than the entire installed coal fleet of the United States. By the time this coal capacity is finished construction, China will have more coal-fired capacity, about 1.4 terawatts, than the entire installed base of generation of every type of generation in the United States of America. Coal, oil, natural gas, hydro, nuclear, etc. I'll repeat, the coal generation capacity in China will soon equal or surpass the entire size of the US grid. And unless or until that changes, here in New England, your belief in the belief of policymakers, oh, we need net zero to fight climate change, it is a widespread delusion. There's no other word for it. These are the emissions, again, updated just today through 2024. The US was 24% of global emissions in 2000. We're now 13%. Meanwhile, China and India have more than doubled on a percentage basis. I see some of these, you, by the way, taking photos of this slide deck. I'm going to give the slide deck to Paul Craney and his team in a PDF, and you're welcome to use it for free, share it, use it as much as you like. Hydrocarbons are here to stay. This is self-explanatory. Again, not my data, the data. Solar and wind, yeah, solar and wind, solar and wind, solar and wind. Yeah. 6% of primary energy in the United States comes from solar and wind. 6%. Aren't they cute? Emissions. Let's look at the emissions data. Energy Information Administration data, not my numbers, the numbers. This is from 2022. These are the latest numbers that were available. Here are the 6 New England states. Here we're in Massachusetts, the most populous state. You account for 1.2% of US emissions, On a global basis, that's 141 million tons total. It's 2.9% of the US and 0.4% of global CO2 emissions. So why is it, and tell me, why is it that you New Englanders believe that you're going to change the trajectory of global climate change when you're 0.4% of the global total. This is the reality. These aren't my numbers, these are the numbers. So what is my bottom line here? You have to be sober, and I'm going to come back to this. You have to be sober about what is realistic, what is cost effective, and what matters. And it is clear to me that the emissions here effectively do not matter in the global scheme of things. Further, the issue now with regard to the grid as a whole, if you step back and think about, well, what is the challenge? Your electricity demand here is not growing. Now, this is no slight on New England, it's just the facts. But this is from 2008, which matters because remember that was the year Barack Obama was elected. It was the year Governor Schwarzenegger in California mandated renewables. And since then, of course, renewables have accelerated in California. But you see this growth obviously in Texas, Florida, Virginia, Louisiana. Texas is a lot of influx of course, people from California. We live in Austin. The number one place from which people are moving to Austin is San Francisco. Gee, I wish they'd go back and take their politics with them. But nevertheless, here are the 6 New England states highlighted. Massachusetts, of the 6 New England states, has seen the biggest decrease in overall electricity sales. It's not easy, but it's easier to change your electricity mix if your demand is growing. It's much harder if it's falling, and more expensive if it's falling. So the reality is that this idea of net zero is hinging on a massive build out of alternative energy. I don't call them renewables, that's a marketing term. I don't call it green, I don't call it clean. Those are marketing terms. It's alternative energy. And it's going to be massively expensive, and it is going to require enormous amounts of land. It won't happen, it can't happen, it won't happen because it can't happen. Your rates for power are already among the highest in the United States. This is EIA data, not my numbers, the numbers. You're second only in the continental US to California. How does that make you feel? There's no award for this high price. But again, the New England states stand out here because in Massachusetts now it's 78% more than the US average, nearly twice the average, or twice what the price is in Texas, nearly twice, of course, the US average, which is 16.5 cents. You're at almost 30 cents per kilowatt hour. That is a crushingly expensive price. And what do I care about? What motivates me in a lot of my work? I care about the poor and the middle class. Who do I love? I love the people who have the names on their shirts. The people who wear their name badges. Those are the people I really care about because they are underrepresented in our political class. And expensive energy is the enemy of the poor. And all of this, all of these decarbonization policies, every one of them is regressive. None of it helps the poor and the middle class. None of it. Despite the rhetoric, oh, it's going to lower your bill, it's going to lower your bill. There is no evidence for this happening. These net zero mandates, there was an excellent study that MassFiscal and I think Americans for Prosperity commissioned from Always On Energy Research. My friends Isaac Orr and Mitch Rawling did this study last year. The existing solar and wind in New England now is about 4 gigawatts. Their low estimate for the amount of solar, wind, batteries, et cetera, was 97 gigawatts. They said the more realistic number is 225 gigawatts. That's an increase of what, 55x? It's a minimum of 24x increase in renewable capacity in New England, and it's likely twice that. You see, these are cartoonish numbers. You can't get, it's like that old line about the guy asking for directions. You know, he goes up to the farmer and says, well, can anyone tell me how to get there? And the farmer says, well, you can go up this way. No, don't go that way. Says, hey, no, sorry, mister, you can't get there from here. You can't get there from here. It's impossible. This is the punchline from their study, that adding all this alt energy capacity would cost $815 billion. I did the simple math. There are 15.1 million people who live in New England. That's $54,000 for every New Englander. $54,000. So, you know, I came in, we live in Austin, I'm leaving. If I was going to tell you what's your political strategy, you hammer this number, and then you hammer it some more. And then you say, well, even if it's half that, it's still $26,000, $27,000 for every resident. It's $1,000 a year between now and 2050. Who's going to vote for that? Not very many people. And it's clear the polling on this cost data is very effective. The average citizen, average voters do not make climate change a priority, and they will not pay extra for it. What about land use? This is the key issue. It's something I've been tracking now for more than 15 years. All over the world, people care about what happens in their neighborhoods. Everyone, everywhere. Everyone, everywhere cares about what happens in their neighborhoods. And I've seen this over and over and over again. And I've written about this for more than 15 years. So I've revised this. These are in New Hampshire. This is, of course, here in Massachusetts. The wind turbines in Falmouth were taken down because of the noise pollution they were creating. Windham and Grafton, that's in Vermont. In Vermont, the last wind project that was proposed, owned by a guy named Dave Blittersdorf, it was called Dairy Air, which was a Dairyar. It was a one-turbine wind project. It was defeated and refused planning permission, I think, in 2020. Vermont has a 100% clean electricity mandate in place. You can't build large solar, you can't build large wind in Vermont, and yet they have this mandate. This is a picture of the Roseman Bridge in Madison County, Iowa. I've been there. I was in Iowa twice. I travel a lot. It's one of the most famous bridges in America. There's no wind turbine there. But in 2020, the Board of Supervisors in Madison County voted in the citizens voted in a new Board of Supervisors. They passed an ordinance prohibiting new wind turbines. And MidAmerican, a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway, a company headed by a guy named Warren Buffett, who in 2014 said there's no reason to build wind turbines unless you get tax credits. MidAmerican sued Madison County to try to intimidate the county into taking a wind project they didn't want. It was a PR blunder of the first order. They later withdrew the lawsuit, and then this is a headline from an article I wrote in Forbes shortly after they withdrew the suit. San Bernardino County, California, the largest county by area in America, more than 2,000 square miles. You cannot build large-scale wind and solar in San Bernardino County, California, a state that has a 100% clean electricity mandate by 2045. Gage County, Nebraska, Norway, yeah. These are the wind rejections. To be clear, I don't like the wind business. In fact, I hate the wind business. I hate those people with a burning passion. And I don't think they like me either, and I'm okay with that. I've seen how they act in rural America, and the way they treat rural Americans has been, in many cases, absolutely despicable. And if the oil and gas industry had acted in rural America the same way the wind industry has done, it would be front page news of the New York Times. But these issues don't get covered in mainstream media outlets because it doesn't fit the narrative. I've written about this for 15 years. The New York Times has never written about what happened in Madison County, never written about the Osage tribe's long-running legal battle with Enel, the longest-running legal battle over wind energy in American history. The New York Times has never written a single word about it. These are the solar rejections. Of course, Northfield is here in Massachusetts. You've got these two projects in Maine. Johnston, Rhode Island, that zoning board rejection was just a few months ago. These are the cumulative numbers, 827 rejections or restrictions of wind and solar, all documented in the Renewable Rejection Database. I maintain that on my website, robertbryce.com. Why did I do it? Followed the admonition of W. Edwards Deming, the great industrial analyst who said, "In God we trust, all others bring data." Well, here's the data. Irrefutable, all of it cataloged, all of it tabulated. I've entered every one of these by hand. What is happening around the world is the same as the backlash you see here in New England, and you see it from Maine to Hawaii. You see it all around the world. At least 135 rejections of wind and solar since about 2016. We're still working on this with my son Jacob on some of this research, but this is Anbord Planiela, this is in Ireland, this is New Zealand, this is in England, this is in Australia. We were in Australia last week. The backlash across rural Australia is just as fierce as it is here in the United States. Battery rejections, I know this is a hot topic here in Massachusetts as well. I'm from Oklahoma. I mentioned Oologah, Oklahoma, the hometown of Will Rogers. They just rejected a battery project there. This, of course, here is in Massachusetts. This is in England. And these projects here, of course, are in Massachusetts as well. Again, the issue is land use. Energy policy and land use policy are two sides of the same coin. And what we see over and over and over and over and over again is this alternative energy push requires massive amounts of land. And all over the world, local people are saying, we don't want them here. Go take them, put them somewhere else where the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow. We don't want it here. Finally, just a bit about Wales. And I'm pleased to see my friend Lisa Leno's here. She's been absolutely fierce. And I do mean fierce for a woman who might weigh 105 pounds. I know you're not supposed to guess a woman's weight, but she is an incredible ally. First time we met in person is here tonight. She did amazing work on offshore wind and the problems with offshore wind. She and another friend of mine, Megan Lapp, who I have said has more grit than a sandpaper factory. Together, they've been amazing. And what we've seen under the Trump administration is the rollback, a lot of this offshore wind foolishness. In my view, the only thing dumber than onshore wind is offshore wind. It is clear that massive amounts of these wind projects that are being permitted, or rather were permitted under the Biden administration, which effectively just rubber stamped any of the applications for offshore wind, were put right on top of known North Atlantic right whale habitat. This is indisputable. These are the heat maps for the whales, and the Biden administration was just effectively sold out to the offshore wind business, completely sold out. And the Trump administration has been rolling back some of these. They could do more. I'm not going to complain about that. You know, I think on many of the things that Trump has done, I think, you know, I have a lot of questions, but on the energy front, many of his instincts are right on target. Here are the National Marine Fisheries Service and their assessments of the critical assessments of what wind turbines and wind turbine development mean for whales. I am old enough to remember when environmentalists cared about whales. It was a long time ago. Sierra Club, Natural Resource Defense Council, National Wildlife Federation, sold out, completely sold out to the climate catastrophism and to big wind for offshore wind, and I think it's just flat despicable. So sober up. This is the message. Sober up. You've got to get rid of these net zero mandates. This is not going to be quick, won't be cheap, it won't be easy. But you have now codified in law here in Massachusetts a net zero mandate. And you have to overturn this because the cost is just going to be prohibitive. It can't be done from a land use standpoint. Makes no sense whatsoever. It weakens the grid. There are no reasons to pursue this except for this political ideology around this. So I think obviously these land use conflicts are going to continue. This is obvious that wind projects are hurting and will continue to hurt marine mammal populations. The quick commercial here. Here's my book. This is my latest one. My wife Lauren and I have 3 children. I've written 6 books. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everyone you know. You don't have to read it, you just have to buy it. And if you buy it on your Kindle, I make a better royalty. So help me out. I'm on Substack. I write on Substack. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok. I'm easy to find on the Google. I'll conclude with this because I'm right at my 20-minute. I'm at 21 minutes.
When was the last time Maura Healey called you to ask her some advice?
Well, we'll get to that in just a minute. I'll just end with this because we're going to a panel discussion. What MassFiscal and Americans for Prosperity are doing on this is absolutely critical. I encourage you to get active, stay active, pack a lunch. This isn't going to be easy. It's not going to be quick, won't be cheap. But you have to get motivated. You have to encourage people to join because this is a critical fight. And I wish you great success. Thank you.
If the American economy were a human body, its heart would be the energy industry. And unfortunately, here in Massachusetts and across New England, across the region, we have politician-induced heart disease. The problems are caused by ourselves, by our elected officials. And MassFiscal is really leading on the front here in Massachusetts. So the best thing you can do, if there's one takeaway, is get involved with MassFiscal and fight back here in Massachusetts. Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance advocates for fiscal responsibility, transparency, and accountability in state government and increased economic opportunity for the people of our Commonwealth. Established in 2012, they are the state's leading taxpayer advocacy organization. Oftentimes, they are the only, soon to be with all of you, loudest voice defending taxpayers in the State House, shining a light on what's going on in the state and acting as a watchdog, something that everyone in this room can play a part in. So make sure to play that watchdog part, because folks, you'll hear from Representative Lombardo, they like to try to get away with things in the State House here, and the average voter isn't aware of these issues. But we'll talk a little bit about the work we've done across New England during the panel discussion, but there is a lot of hope, especially using the energy issue to amplify the message and start to get voters to understand the threat of these policies.
Thank you, Ross. Most of that was unscripted, those compliments, so thank you, Ross. Very nicely done. I'm going to just do a little intro of the panel. Ross already kind of spoke, but he's got 15 years underneath his belt doing political advocacy, grassroots organization. I think just watching him, it speaks for itself. State Representative Marc Lombardo, first elected to the legislature in 2010 after serving as a selectman in the town of Billerica. Since his election to the legislature, he's been a fierce advocate for the taxpayers, ratepayers, and for common sense policies. Rep. Lombardo is often the leading voice for transparency and reform in a very opaque legislature with a broken legislative process. This is the guy. Jack Gately. Jack is a native Bostonian, resident of Plymouth with his wife and family. Okay, don't hold this against him. In 1988, his first paid political job was in the campaign of Congressman Jerry Studs. From 1992 to 1996, he worked as a staffer in the Massachusetts legislature. Ooh, he left his political career in 2001 and became a Republican in 2009. Jack owns and operates Jack Gately Real Estate, 3 real estate schools. Jack regularly posts breaking news stories and creates content on social media. He has a large following where he reports on news that's not getting reported. Jack is the man. He has a website, massiveuturn.com. Check it out. He reports a lot of news that's not getting reported. Jessica Machado, state-based independent journalist and conservative advocate. She's best known for in-depth coverage of high-profile local stories, including the Karen Reed trial and ongoing, sadly, Massachusetts migrant shelter crisis. Jessica is a former lead investigative reporter at the Fall River Reporter, where she's focused on political corruption and human interest stories. She's also the host of the Jessica Machado Show, South Coast Tonight, New Bedford, and former fill-in for the Grace Curley Howie Carr Show. Lives in Somerset with her family. Thank you, Jessica. Last but not least is Mike Urban, a blunt, data-driven commentator and also a real estate professional who uses his fast-growing YouTube channel to tackle political dysfunction, economic waste, and cultural decline in Mass. With 1 decade experience as a blue-collar electrician and other building a real estate estate, with nearly 150 agents across 5 states, Mike brings both first-hand experience and analytical clarity. If you don't follow him, you should. I have so many people that send me your shows as if I don't know who you are, so great job, Mike. That said, we are going to open up the discussion.
All right, so we heard a lot from Robert about all these data points and how obviously these mandates do not work and are driving up costs on everybody in Massachusetts, really everybody around the region besides my home state of the Free State of New Hampshire, where we do not have these mandates. It's the only state in New England that does not. But what, we'll go around the panel, like what have you heard from your constituents, people in your area? How are these mandates most affecting ratepayers? What's driving it? What are the policies that are connecting to the price increases?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one. So I think that everyone's eyes really opened up this winter when, in the fall, silently, the Healy administration had approved massive rate increases for National Grid, and the whole host of energy providers. And then everyone got their bills in January and February and almost fell over because they doubled and tripled. And when you open up your bill, you see all of these items that you have no idea what they're for. They're funding Mass Save, which is the biggest scam going, that has no oversight, that is run by former energy executives. You've got all these green energy items on your bill, and it suddenly, people woke up and were outraged because they're seeing that there's actually consequences to electing folks that think of green energy policy as religion. And that's what you have in Beacon Hill. They don't look at the data that we saw today. Nobody who looks at this data can say with any seriousness that green energy policies are working in Massachusetts. You just can't do it. It's just math. It's just common sense. But that's not what happens up on Beacon Hill. This is to satisfy the left wing of the party here of the Democratic Party in Massachusetts, to make the activists feel happy with the green energy policy, and it literally has become religion for these folks. So they don't care about the math, they don't care about the pain, but they love the politics, which we saw when Maura Haley came out and said, "Hey everybody, I saved you $50. Now, I made your bill triple, but I saved you $50. It's fraudulent. It's fraudulent policy. It is, and it's not taking care of the most vulnerable in our Commonwealth who struggle to heat their homes in the wintertime.
I mean, my first thought is I'm not sure anybody understands how this happened. We have a lot of local groups that have popped up, and once those bills came out, we're like, how did we get here? What happened? Today, despite having these atrocious bills and these changes on their bills every month, I'm still not sure people can make the connection between our elected officials and what they're seeing on those bills. Certainly there's outrage. Certainly they see the pinch in their wallets, but can they make that connection between who they voted for and who is actually making these decisions? I don't think they do yet. I think that's why it's important for events like this. And then for those of us up here to continue to share information to them that does not make it to mainstream media. Unfortunately, this was kind of a blessing in disguise. It seemed to have motivated people. They are getting a little aggressive online, and they want answers. But I think it's up to some of us to actually deliver that and kind of point them in the right direction.
Well, in terms of they can't make the connection, I think in a way the system is designed so they can't make the connection, so that there isn't a direct line. So in terms of telling the story, which I think Mike did a great job on his YouTube video that kind of went super viral, I think you deserve a lot of credit for that, putting this issue online, is to focus on choice. And I think MassFiscal had a video where they actually basically told a Boston Globe type story, which is Boston Globe never writes a straight news lead. Everything's a feature story. And when you did that story about Mr. Lowenthal, I think his name was, where it put a face to the story, people understood it. People connected with that, rather than Bart. No offense to our awesome speaker, people understand other people. And when we talk about highlighting individuals for whom in which they see themselves, and focus that discussion upon choice, I think we can really make a headway and make that connection that you're talking about.
Here's what happened, okay? I made a video, as he said, about a week before the news covered it, okay? That video got upwards of 250,000 views since I published the video. And what I noticed was nobody was talking about this. Nobody had any information. Nobody had anything backed by any levels of data. And people will continue to pay their bills, okay? I think this was an 80-20 issue prior to the bill spiking. I think 80% of the people voted for these things, unfortunately. And then once they got their bills, it seems as though that script has become flipped, where people are very concerned with their costs. And as I said, in terms of making the video, nobody was talking about these things. It was a week later when I think it was Ben Simino, he started picking up on this because they probably saw that and they're like, We have to cover this. So all of us sitting here are in a position where we are forcing the legacy media to cover the stories that nobody wants to cover. And it's very important that we could get this message across. And ultimately, something needs to be done throughout the legislature. And it starts with you guys. It starts with the people in this room. And it starts with us influencing you guys in terms of what the data is in order to make this state affordable. I think everybody could agree with that, right?
Just following up on what Jack said, people relate to people. Ironically, there was a testimony on energy policy yesterday at the State House. One of the state reps, his name is Jeff Turco, was quoted in State House News talking to the energy secretary. And he said, I put a heat pump in my house. I followed the advice that was recommended to me. And in January and February, my combined bill was $2,600. He said, so, Madam Secretary, are we balancing, green energy policy with, or are we putting priority to the cost to consumers? And their answer is, well, we want to do all of the above. They don't want to do all of the above. And even when it's happening to your elected officials and they talk to their colleagues, they still can't get over the hump of this religion-like policy that is driving them to make horrible decisions for the residents of the Commonwealth.
If I can just chime in one other thing, please don't leave it to just the three of us or whatever. You live in your town. There are opportunities, huge opportunities, to point things out that happen in your town.
Send them to me.
Yeah. No. Have them post it themselves. We're not super special. We have a Facebook account just like you do. You have to go tell the story locally in your network to do there's no reason why you can't do what we're doing. I mean, we're just knuckleheads that sit in front of the camera. I mean, you can do it. Anybody can do this if you have a story locally to expose the story before the media. Because as Michael mentioned, I mean, they're out to lunch or gone.
They just don't want to cover these issues until people bring them up. And that's what it is. And guess what? Nothing is going to change if people are not bringing it up. These legacy media is brutal here. You guys know it. I know it. Everybody knows it. And here's a good story. I'll tell you a quick story. So a lot of people, maybe you're even in this room, and I apologize, but almost every single day I get an email from somebody at the Cape or southern Massachusetts about the South Shore wind, okay? Every single day I get these emails. And the reason I haven't covered it yet is because the people that are complaining about the wind turbines in their backyard are the same people that voted for these things. And now all of a sudden they're making it a big deal. And the fact is, this is a two-part problem. The first part is that there wasn't enough transparency when these mandates and these things were brought to the state, right? Everybody wants clean air. Everybody wants clean water. But when you look at the math behind it and the data to get there, it doesn't make sense. But that's what they hide from you. That is what is being hidden. And like Jack said, anything that you see in your towns, bring it up. I feel like a lot of people are in a position where they feel like they'll be ostracized for speaking their mind in Massachusetts. That's how I truly feel. You'll lose friends, you'll lose family, you colleagues at work, and you can't really have that mindset. Because if you do, then absolutely nothing will change. Everything will remain the same. And these are tabletop issues. Everybody is concerned with how much money they have, how much money they're going to spend. And I'm just happy you're all here.
I could just add one quick point. I completely agree about the salience and the power of the affordability issue, because this should cut across any partisan divide. Because in theory, politicians of all stripes care about the poor and the middle class, in theory. Another quick point, don't underestimate the amount of money that has been spent here in Massachusetts by the climate NGOs, including Rocky Mountain Institute, NRDC, and others, to promote the net zero agenda and the anti-natural gas agenda. Remember, Mayor Wu, 2 years ago, I believe it was, banned the use of natural gas in new buildings, in new city buildings in Boston. Now, I live in Texas. I heard it gets cold here. Is this true? It gets cold here. Your city mayor is banning the direct use of natural gas and will force the city of Boston to use heat pumps, which when it gets cold are completely inefficient. So this mindset has been pushed, and this policy has been pushed to the highest levels of government, and it is pernicious, but they've been incredibly effective. Now, one other quick point. All of this is in violation, these bans on natural gas are in violation of the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975. This was litigated in California, the Ninth Circuit, in the city of Berkeley the California Restaurant Association against the city of Berkeley, which was the first city to ban the direct use of natural gas in new construction in 2019. That was ruled illegal by the Ninth Circuit. There's another case now pending in the Second Circuit, which I think includes Massachusetts, where some propane dealers in New York are the lead plaintiffs. But that legal precedent hasn't been set here in Massachusetts. It should be. But there are multiple fronts that have to be fought on this. But I don't know the budget for MassFiscal or American for Prosperity. I don't think they come close to the $130 or $140 million that's being spent by Rocky Mountain Institute, or the 200-some million spent by NRDC. You're outmoneyed, you're outgunned, but as Mike said, you got to fight like hell.
I want to piggyback on something too that he mentioned with the heat pumps and Mayor Wu. So everybody wants, and Jack is going to know where I go with this, but everybody wants cheaper housing. Okay, how is it possible to build cheaper, affordable housing, but meanwhile you're increasing the cost to build housing by introducing all of these EV mandates? It's renewable mandates. Getting rid of natural gas, it only makes it less cost effective. I mean, it's not rocket science. We're not building rocket ships up here, guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't rocket science. It's just the fact that there's a disparity between what you read and what's fact and fiction. And that's what it is. You want affordable housing in Massachusetts? Good luck, right? They want to build more homes. You think building more homes is going to make things affordable? It would, right? In theory. But not when you're increasing the cost from the builders. How is that humanly possible? It's ridiculous.
And when you get rid of the competition, you also get rid of the incentive to innovate. So when there's no other option, let me just ask you, has anyone heard of the new 50-year light bulb? No, of course you haven't. Because the Thomas Edison light bulb is not an option. So there's no need to innovate anymore. And the same thing would happen if we got rid of all of these conventional sources.
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing. I mean, I talk about this with Ross a little bit, and Robert mentioned being in Texas, and I talked to a lot of you guys being in Massachusetts. At times it could be a little discouraging, is one way to describe it, being here. But flip it upside down. You're not in Texas. You're not in New Hampshire. You're deep behind enemy lines in Massachusetts. You guys have an obligation to be the one that speaks up. As Robert showed on that screen, a few Massachusetts towns stopped really bad things, and it really started with just people speaking up. MassFiscal, Jason, who is floating around here, interviewed a lot of these people, and these projects stopped. When you stop really bad things in California, Illinois, New York, and Massachusetts, what happens to us as a country? Places like Texas and New Hampshire never have to deal with these problems. So don't be discouraged. Don't move to Florida, New Hampshire, Texas yet. Stay here. Continue the fight. When you win in Massachusetts, the victory tastes so much better. So think of it out. You're deployed. We're behind enemy lines. When you run out of ammo, you throw rocks. When you run out of rocks, you throw punches. That's our job in this room. Don't let them win. And occasionally we do win, and it's wonderful. They don't know how to handle when they lose in the state. So no offense to Texas and New Hampshire, but sometimes when we win here, it feels really good.
If I may, Paul, before you, I just wanted to say something about that. I'm from Somerset, Massachusetts. We had 2 coal-burning power plants in Somerset. We lost Montauk, and then shortly after, we lost Brayton Point. And I don't know if anybody's followed the news from down there, but Prysmian, an Italian cable manufacturing company from Italy, came down and said, we're going to use this space of this old former power plant. You may know Joe Biden actually came to visit us in Somerset on the exact same spot. He talked about this green energy initiative. It was the best thing for our community. And then we had a bunch of residents who started to actually look at this company, what this project was going to look like, and they started fighting back. And they were attending zoning board meetings and planning board meetings where nobody would ever go before. And we uncovered a lot of things about this company. They weren't going to be great neighbors to us. We were worried about the sustainability post an election with Trump potentially winning. We found some real ironic pieces to their puzzle, such as talking about green energy. We want to, help support wind energy, but they were going to use diesel-powered ships to come in and take these cables out and distribute them amongst the world. And we kind of found that to be a real kind of tipping point where, they were all about financial gain and not about our community and for the bigger picture. And so to make a long story short, because I know you've got some questions, our town fought back. We had a really great motivated group of people. We started a Facebook page called Save Our Bay Brayton Point, where we had thousands of people that showed up to meetings, and we showed up to every one of those meetings and pushed back. And when the elected officials weren't doing what we wanted them to do, we got rid of them and elected new ones. And that's the thing that I feel like we have an obligation to share, is that, we're very lucky with our state representative over here, but it's not everywhere. And so it starts small. We fought back. And unfortunately, they left us in a town divided. We had some people that really bought into this. And those of us who saw through it, we never believed there was an energy crisis that we needed to be a part of. And now we're left kind of mending those fences, and Prysmian is gone. The day after the election, they said that they weren't going to be here and this project was gone. So yeah, it is an accomplishment, I think, for the people of Somerset and New England. But, to Paul's point, fighting back, we're just a group of regular small people that actually started showing up and going to meetings and making change. So if we can do it in Somerset, you can do it where you are too.
I'll just say real quick, who here thinks that Vermont is a deep red state? Right? So last year, it was actually 2 years ago, the Vermont legislature had a progressive supermajority that could override Governor Phil Scott is a Republican, the governor of the state, and they have these mandates worse than Massachusetts, actually, because you can actually sue on the Global Warming Solutions Act in Vermont. So people are suing that you're not hitting these goals of things that don't actually exist, things like EV trucks that don't exist. I call that one the Great New Hampshire Auto Dealer Subsidy, because they don't exist, so they just go to New Hampshire to buy them. But they instituted something called Act 18, the Clean Heat Standard. And it was an overall massive, basically tax increase on the people of Vermont. They were facing property tax increases. The affordability issue in the state of Vermont was so dire that people were, I had a friend that, and not to be mentioned because he's now a state senator, but he said if he lost his race, then he would move to New Hampshire because he simply couldn't afford to live there. He was a seventh generation Vermonter. We took that issue at AFP and we said this is something everyone's going to feel. They can't afford these bills. We went out, found stories from average people of how this would impact them. We publicized that. We did a mail campaign, a digital campaign. This is the state of Bernie Sanders. The Bernie machine is in Vermont. And the result was that, sure, Democrats went out and voted en masse, 75% for Bernie Sanders, then 70% for Governor Phil Scott, and then Republican down the ticket by and large. It was the largest election swing in 40 years. Of 62 seats across the country that went from Democrat to Republican, 26 of them were in the state of Vermont. They lost their supermajority, and they are, to a lot of your points, they are still set on, the progressives are still set on their ideology, digging their hole deeper, and we see an opportunity for Vermont to actually completely change course. Because of this issue, because of the energy issue. People feel this at home. They feel this every single day. You just have to go out and get the word out, connect the policy to the politician, and you can make change.
Yeah, Ross is totally right. That was a huge game changer in Vermont. If you have questions, raise your hand. One of the staff will come by, pick it up, pick up your written question. I do have a question that was directed to Robert. Any comment on small-scale safe nuclear? And the second question is, if we don't hit net zero, playing to the left, how can we feel virtuous?
I'm sorry, how do we build what?
Virtuous.
Okay, let me just make one quick point about following up on Jessica's point about this cross-political alliance that I've seen over and over in small towns across the U.S. that have fought wind, solar, batteries. People, regardless of their political alliances or their wealth status within the community, they can ally and do many, many times. I've seen it around the issue of fighting these kinds of projects, many of them from foreign corporations, et cetera, but I've seen it over and over again. Regarding nuclear, I'm adamantly pro-nuclear, have been saying the same thing for more than 15 years. We're seeing progress on the nuclear front in the U.S. President Trump signed those executive orders a few weeks ago. There were 4 of them. Most important endorsement of nuclear power by a sitting U.S. president since Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace speech in 1953. This should catalyze and will catalyze a lot of movement on nuclear. There are a lot of promising companies with small modular reactors. The problem is we have too many. There are 51 companies that are trying to commercialize small modular reactors. We need maybe 2 or 3. We need to settle on 1 or 2 designs, whether it's light water, molten salt, et cetera. A lot of promise, but now we have to build them and we have to get busy. How do you feel virtuous? Hell, I don't know. It's enough to fight the good fight, and I think that's part of it. The fight itself, the resistance itself, has to be part of the reward. And I gave a shout out to my friend Lisa Lenoz, who's here. She's fierce and just unrelenting, and as fierce as anyone I've ever seen on these issues. And why does she do it? I think it's just that, she believes in this, and there's a reward in the process.
I have another question. I think I'm going to paraphrase this question, kind of directed to Mark, but Robert, you should jump in too. So when net zero comes up as a topic for consideration, let's say at the State House in 2021, it came up and you voted against it. You're like one of 5 people that voted out of 200 against it. How do you combat that narrative when it first comes up? And this could be applied to a normal conversation. You talk to a friend, neighbor when they talk about net zero. What is the talking point you use to combat? Let's do net zero by 2050 or 2045, whatever the arbitrary date is. How do you combat that? So Mark, you did it in the State House. I think everyone now, including your Democratic colleagues, are kind of wishing they could go back and vote your way. But from day one when it came up, how did you push back on that whole narrative?
Yeah, I think maybe my Republican colleagues wish they voted differently, but my Democrat colleagues don't wish they voted differently. In fact, this budget cycle, I put forward a series of energy-focused amendments to make these mandates goals, to repeal the mandate to stop net new sales of gas-powered cars by 2035, and they went down on party lines. How do you talk about it? Like we're talking about it tonight. You have to be honest and courageous that it's a scam, that it's hurting regular citizens and families who can't afford to live in the Commonwealth. They can't afford to heat their homes or cool them on 95-degree days like we just had. It's kitchen table conversation. It's real. It impacts families on a regular basis. And as Jessica talked about, the communities will come together and have these small victories. And I harken back to what I just told you about the unsuccessful amendments to try to change policy. And that becomes frustrating. But I do believe it's going to change because it has to. Because as Robert said earlier, this can't happen. The math doesn't work. It literally can't work. And so I think once 2030 and 2031 and 32 comes and residents look and say, there are no EV charges for cars around the Commonwealth. How the hell are we going to get rid of gas-powered cars? It's going to be a big problem. And I think that's going to wake up people because it smacks you in your face. You can't hide from it at that point. You can't be lost in your kid's soccer game when you know that you can't drive your car and you won't be able to power it and be able to live a normal life. So the resistance will come. Change will come only when it's forced and there's no other choice. But until we get to that point where the hands are forced, you're going to see the zealots continue to just push this policy to make themselves feel virtuous.
Another question for Robert here. Do you think that New England should go back to a regulated market structure from the deregulated structure we currently have?
This is a really interesting question. My first book was on Enron. I published it in 2002. I was at the Enron building when it went bankrupt on December 2nd of 2001. I wrote the book in about 6 months, and while I was writing it, I interviewed a guy who had worked for Houston Natural Gas, and at that time he said, I don't think this deregulation of electricity markets, which was just started in Texas then, and it was it was pushed by Ken Lay at Enron. He called it, what did he call it? Market restructuring. Well, it was to destroy the vertical monopolies for electricity. I'll quote my friend Meredith Angwin, who lives in Vermont and is a fierce and very knowledgeable person on electric grids. She said, look, I'm not in favor of monopolies, but I am in favor of accountability. And this problem that you have in these deregulated markets is that no one's accountable. That's what happened in Texas after Winter Storm Uri. Everyone looked around and said, well, who's accountable? And then they said, no one. Well, the market failed. Well, why did the market fail? Well, it was badly designed. And who designed the market? A bunch of lawyers. And why are they lawyers? Because they couldn't do the math to get into engineering school. But you create these systems and markets where there's no accountability. So I'm not in favor of monopolies either. But at least in monopoly markets, there is accountability and a clear line of sight to who you hold responsible for affordability, reliability, and resilience. And instead, what we've seen with the Enron model is you get a lot of players come in that are undercapitalized, don't have any skin in the game, and if things go bad, they head out of town. This is what we saw after Winter Storm Uri.
Robert, a question to you. Have you used your generator in Austin yet?
As soon as we bought it, the grid suddenly became more reliable. I don't know what the hell. Lawrence going, $15,000, we haven't used it one damn time. Well, I know, but no, we haven't.
Robert, I have the benefit of having one as well at my house. I spent the money years ago, and when we lose electricity on the street, my house is lit up like a Christmas tree. I don't think my neighbors love it too much, but I invite them in anyway.
So we have a lot of written questions, and I think I can't get to them all, but after, you can certainly come and ask questions. All right, so this is a question for the whole group, because we've kind of been touching on this, but how do we get nuclear to be successful in Massachusetts?
I'll go first. We need information. I need information like what was given to me today and to all of you so that I can share it with my followers and my readers and pass it on to my local elected officials. I don't know much about nuclear. I want to learn, but I need all of that information. So events like this, easy to read, easy to consume, pieces or nuggets of information for the regular average homeowner is very important. I really try to break things down. I'm a regular person, a middle-class family. I don't like things too complicated. And to, I think, your point, people are busy. They have lives. They have soccer games. They have families. And they don't have time to do the digging and the work. So we need people like our guest speaker tonight to do that work for us, give it to us, and let us share it with everybody. Mainstream media will not do it. Legacy media does not work in tandem with your message because they're owned by other people. And a great benefit to being an independent journalist is I am only owned by my readers. No one tells me what to write. Nobody tells me you can't publish that. So if you want to send me some nuclear information, I'll share it out with my besties. But we've got to get the information down to the regular average person. And by the way, I worked in media down in Fall River in this area where I'm from, and it was publishing stories about South Coast Wind and Prysmian. Getting into the phones of people that vote and attend meetings is a very important piece to the activism part of it. So we need to educate them, and we depend on our leaders who understand this industry to share it with us.
I'll just say on the nuclear front, as someone that lives in New Hampshire, where we have Seabrook Nuclear Power Plant that powers this place here. If you, for your leftist or progressive friends, if they care about climate change, they, want to address that issue, and they don't hate humanity, then they should love nuclear power. And you're going to see things in New Hampshire in the north of a much different energy plan than any other state in this region. They are going to be investing heavily in nuclear. Little side note, they do want to leave ISO New England, so that could be a big problem for Massachusetts. But that's the future. If we have to build, if you were going to have, President Trump wants us to be the leaders in artificial intelligence. If we're going to do that, windmills and solar panels are not going to do it. As Robert pointed out, there just isn't the power there. You need to invest in nuclear energy, affordable, reliable energy that is going to be able to power the 21st century. Windmills that kill whales offshore and industrialize our oceans are not going to do that.
I want to piggyback on that a second. So I spent probably at least 30 hours researching AI and also researching nuclear. I have not done the video yet, but I promise I will. And one thing that I found really surprising is that, and Robert maybe know the numbers better than I do, but the amount of energy that we use and the amount of electricity that we use because of AI is only going to continue to increase, and it's going to continue to infiltrate the grid. And the fact is, I just don't see a world where solar and a world where wind, at least, not right now, maybe never, will be able to compensate for the amount of energy used. On top of that, when you look at and Robert touched on this, the footprint, the amount of land used, I just want to put this into perspective for you, okay? It's 97,000 football fields. 97,000 football fields throughout New England. That's what we're talking about here in terms of land use. That is a lot of land. And I think that what I'll probably do, and maybe I'll collaborate with some people here, is I think that I'll plan on putting together some kind of video in regards to nuclear that's absorbable for people to understand. And then what your responsibility would be is to advocate for that if it makes sense. But we need the data. We need to study that data, and we need to articulate it in a way that makes sense to pretty much everybody.
Jack, you're a Plymouth resident.
Yeah, I am. That's why I want to mention that. So I can tell you that in beautiful Plymouth, where I'm from, that we miss the tax revenue that used to come from our power plant. And I miss my neighbors because a lot of them lived in my neighborhood and they all had well-paying jobs, and now they all moved away. And they were great neighbors. I think there is, when we talk about whether it's nuclear power or any of this, there's a huge parallel to how to stop this, because I think that's basically what we're talking about. And that is with this famous book, some of you may have read it, The Power Broker by Robert Moses, where he was building these highways all over New York, and he seemed absolutely unstoppable until one time he proposed to build 3 highways across the island of Manhattan, and that was just too much. And that formed a coalition to stop those highways, and they were never built. And shortly thereafter, the federal government stopped highway construction effectively all across the country. And that would seem 3 or 4 years before that seemed absolutely inconceivable. But they went too far, and the people that saw it took advantage. So whether it's nuclear power or any of these things like this, if it seems impossible, these windmills and the batteries and the whole thing, it's totally doable, because the hubris is their biggest flaw.
I think the narrative around nuclear power is definitely changing, right? It's changed in Europe in the wake of the Russia invading Ukraine. You saw Secretary Wright was in Poland just a few weeks ago. Poland is now going to build 3 AP-1000s because they need to reduce their reliance on coal, and they never want to be reliant on the Russians for gas. So we're seeing a nuclear resurgence in Europe. There's no doubt about it. It's coming in the United States. I'm pro-nuclear, but we have to be very sober about how soon it might happen. And I think logically, I mean, just looking at how long it took to build Plant Vogtle, it was many years over time, over budget. It's expensive, and that's going to be part of the problem in selling new nuclear, and it's going to take time. But I think the public is now, the sentiment has changed. It's a generational change where younger people are more concerned about climate change, whereas when I was a kid, the concern was about nuclear war. And the conflation of nuclear war and nuclear energy was very clear when I was a kid. So if it's going to be 10 years or 15 years before you get substantial new nuclear here in the US or in more specifically in New England, what do you have to do? You need natural gas, and you need it right damn now. You know, and I think that could change now with President Trump. And thank God Andrew Cuomo lost. I wish he lost even more in New York. I'm not thrilled about the new mayor, but he blocked the gas pipelines into New England that could have gone across New York. You have the Marcellus Shale that's not far away. That's Prudhoe Bay under Pittsburgh. There's massive amounts of gas that could be coming into New England that could help solve your affordability problem, but you need a pipeline to make, or pipelines to make that happen, so you can get off of fuel oil. You need not all the way, but you need more diverse fuel sources here in New England. And before you get nuclear, you need to get natural gas.
Let's remember, Mara Healey stopped 2 gas pipelines and is very proud of it.
And just one last, I know we're over time, Paul, but one last sort of fact to take home with you, because a lot of, whether it's Governor Healy or Governor Hochul, or you go down the list of Democrats that demonize natural gas, the largest reduction in carbon emissions in human history was created solely by the expansion and use of American natural gas. That has been the driving force. It has not been the solar farms and wind farms in Texas and California. It's been natural gas across the country and the expanded use of that. That's what's driven our carbon reductions much greater than any of the so-called green energy.
So that's pretty virtuous. I think we're going to stop there. Thank you to our panel, our guests. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Ross. And thank you for all joining. We're going to stick around a little bit. Feel free to ask any questions. You can follow our guests on social media. Their Twitter handles are on the back there. But thank you all for joining us.